Just another defendant to us. Those words would echo through Officer Anthony Rowe's nightmares for years to come. Judge Carol Noyes approached the federal courthouse steps at 8:45 a.m., her tailored tan blazer crisp in the morning light, a luxurious leather handbag hanging from her arm. The same entrance she'd walked through every workday for 6 years. Another one trying to skip the line. Rowe stepped directly into her path, blocking the marble stairs with his body. His partner, Reuben Dolan, moved to flank her right side. Defendant entrance is around back, sweetheart. Rowe's voice dripped with condescension, his eyes scanning her with barely concealed contempt. Carol stopped, maintaining her composure. I'm Judge Noyes. I work here. Rowe laughed, a sharp mocking sound that made Dolan smirk. Sure you are, honey. And I'm the Pope. He grabbed her elbow, fingers digging into her arm. Listen, I don't care if you think you're special. You're just another defendant to us. Carol tried to pull away. Officer, you're making a mistake. The only mistake is you thinking you can talk back to me. Rowe twisted her arm behind her back, forcing her toward the side entrance. The luxurious handbag slipped down her arm as she struggled to maintain her balance. Dolan grabbed her other arm, and together they marched her away from the judge's entrance like a common criminal. You people always got some story, Rowe muttered to Dolan, loud enough for Carol to hear. His grip tightened as they hauled her past the main security checkpoint. Courthouse employees stopped mid-stride, mouths falling open. Carol's clerk, Jennifer Morrison, stood frozen in the hallway, her face a mask of horror. Bet she's got priors, Dolan said quietly, watching Carol's face for a reaction. They usually do. They forced her through the defendant intake area, past holding cells that reeked of disinfectant and despair, past the fingerprint station, past defendants in orange jumpsuits who watched this well-dressed black woman being manhandled by 2 smirking cops. Carol's jaw clenched, but her eyes never left the bronze nameplate she'd glimpsed as they dragged her past the main courtroom. The Honorable Judge Carol Noyes, Federal District Court, Northern Division. 20 feet from her own courtroom, being brutalized by officers who saw only her skin color, not her 6 years of impeccable service, not the hundreds of cases she'd presided over, not the respect she'd earned from every attorney and clerk in the building. Just another defendant. Have you ever seen instant karma this brutal? Before we continue, please write in the comment section where in the world you are watching from. Like and share our stories. If you believe in justice and equity, subscribe for more stories where dignity is restored. The morning sun cast long shadows across the federal courthouse steps as Carol Noyes climbed toward the entrance at exactly 8:45 a.m. 6 years she'd walked this path. 6 years of arriving early, of reviewing case files before the docket began, of upholding the law with precision and fairness that had earned her respect from every corner of the legal community. Her tan blazer was perfectly tailored, her white blouse crisp beneath it. The luxurious leather handbag on her arm held her judicial credentials, her phone, and the notes she'd prepared the night before for today's cases. She was thinking about the motion hearing scheduled for 10 o'clock when 2 uniformed officers materialized at the top of the stairs. Officer Anthony Rowe planted himself directly in her path, arms crossed. His partner, Reuben Dolan, moved to block her right side like they'd done this dance 1,000 times before. Can I help you? Carol kept her voice neutral, professional. Rowe's eyes traveled from her locks to her shoes and back up, his expression hardening with each second. Defendant entrance is around back. He jerked his thumb toward the side of the building. You need to go through security screening. Carol's hand tightened on her handbag. She'd seen this movie before, had presided over cases that started with exactly this kind of profiling. But she'd never imagined being cast in the leading role. I'm Judge Noyes, she said clearly. I work here. This is the entrance I use every morning. Rowe's face split into a grin that didn't reach his eyes. He glanced at Dolan, who shook his head with exaggerated disbelief. Sure you are, honey. Rose's voice was silk wrapped around steel. "And I'm the Pope. You got ID?" "Of course I have." "Then you can show it at the defendant entrance like everybody else." He stepped closer, invading her space. "Nice try, sweetheart. You people always got some story." "You people." The words landed like a slap. Carol reached for her handbag, but Rose's hand shot out and gripped her elbow. Hard. His fingers dug into her arm with practiced pressure, just below the threshold of leaving immediate marks. "Officer, you're making a serious mistake." Carol's voice remained steady, but her heart hammered against her ribs. "The only mistake," Rose said, pulling her toward the stairs leading to the side entrance, "is you thinking you can talk back to me." Dolan moved in to take her other arm. "Come on, sweetheart. Let's not make this harder than it needs to be." They began to march her down the steps, away from the main entrance, away from her chambers, away from the dignity she'd spent her entire career building. Carol's last thought before they rounded the corner was simple and cold. These men have no idea what they've just done. The side entrance smelled different. Stale coffee and industrial cleaner instead of the polished wood and leather scent of the main halls. Rowe and Dolan pushed Carol through the metal detector reserved for defendants and visitors, their hands never leaving her arms. "Keep moving," Rowe muttered, steering her past the security checkpoint where two guards looked up from their monitors. One started to speak, but Rowe cut him off with a shake of his head. "Got a live one, trying to sneak in through the judge's entrance." Carol's jaw clenched. The hallway stretched ahead, fluorescent lights humming overhead. This was the path defendants walked every day, the ones who couldn't make bail, the ones who arrived in shackles and orange jumpsuits. She'd never seen it from this angle. A maintenance worker mopping the floor stopped mid-stroke, his eyes widening as they passed. Carol kept her head up, refusing to look away. She would not give these men the satisfaction of seeing her break. They turned a corner, and suddenly they were in the main corridor, the one that connected the holding cells to the courtrooms, the one where lawyers huddled with clients, where prosecutors reviewed files, where her own staff moved between chambers and court. Jennifer Morrison stood 20 feet away, a stack of case files in her arms. Carol's clerk for 4 years. The woman who brought her coffee every morning, who knew her schedule better than she did, who'd helped her draft some of her most important rulings. Jennifer's face went white. The files slipped from her hands, papers fluttering to the floor like dying birds. "Judge," Jennifer's voice cracked. "Keep moving." Dolan's grip tightened, forcing Carol forward. Jennifer stood frozen, one hand covering her mouth, watching her boss being perp-walked through the courthouse. In the defendant waiting area, a dozen people sat on hard plastic chairs. Men in suits with their court-appointed lawyers. Women clutching purses, waiting for their cases to be called. A teenager in a too large hoodie, his mother's hand gripping his shoulder. They all turned to watch as Rowe and Dolan marched a well-dressed black woman through the room, like she was the morning's entertainment. "Bet she's got priors," Rowe said to Dolan, his voice just loud enough to carry. A stage whisper perfected over years of humiliating people who couldn't fight back. "They always do." Dolan chuckled. Probably why she tried to use the wrong entrance. Thought she could avoid the scanners. Carol's hands trembled, but she forced them still. Every eye in that waiting room followed her, some with pity, some with curiosity, some with the grim recognition of people who'd been exactly where she was, powerless in the grip of men who wore their authority like a weapon. The door to the preliminary hearing room loomed ahead. Carol took a deep breath and stepped through, still held between the two officers. The humiliation was complete, but the reckoning hadn't even begun. The preliminary hearing room was smaller than Carol's own courtroom. Temporary Judge Lawrence Bennett sat behind the bench, a visiting jurist covering vacation schedules. He looked bored already, flipping through paperwork with the mechanical efficiency of someone who'd seen 1,000 cases just like this one. Or so he thought. Carol sat in the defendant's chair, her luxurious leather handbag balanced on her lap. She pulled out a gold pen, a gift from the Bar Association when she'd been appointed to the bench, and opened a small notebook. Her hands were steady now. The shock had burned away, leaving something colder and sharper in its wake. "The people call Officer Anthony Rowe," the prosecutor announced. Rowe stood and straightened his uniform, walking to the witness stand with the confidence of a man who'd done this dance 100 times before. He placed his hand on the Bible, swore to tell the truth, and settled into his seat like he was sitting down to Sunday dinner. "Officer Rowe," the prosecutor began, "please describe the events of this morning." Rowe cleared his throat. "At approximately 8:45 a.m., I observed an unidentified individual attempting to gain unauthorized access to the federal courthouse through the judge's entrance." His voice was measured, professional, every word carefully chosen. "When I approached to verify her credentials, she refused to provide identification." Carol's pen scratched across the page. Lie number 1. "The individual became increasingly agitated," Rowe continued, his eyes fixed on some point above Judge Bennett's head. Never looking at Carol, she raised her voice, causing a disturbance that disrupted courthouse security operations. Lie number 2. "I attempted to de-escalate the situation by calmly directing her to the appropriate entrance for court attendees and defendants. However, she became verbally aggressive and non-compliant with lawful orders." Carol underlined the word aggressive 3 times. There it was, the magic word that turned a calm, professional woman into a threat. The coded language that had sent countless people who looked like her, into the system's grinding gears. Judge Bennett leaned forward slightly. "Did she make any threats, officer?" "She claimed to be a judge, Your Honor." Rowe's lips twitched with the ghost of a smile. "In my experience, individuals attempting to circumvent security protocols often fabricate authority they don't possess. It's a common tactic." And her demeanor? Combative, confrontational. "When I attempted to escort her to the proper entrance, she resisted, creating a scene visible to courthouse staff and visitors." Rowe folded his hands in his lap. "In my professional judgment, her behavior constituted disorderly conduct and obstruction of governmental operations." Carol kept writing. Every lie, every distortion, every word that would hang around his neck like a millstone when the truth came out. Judge Bennett nodded. "Thank you, officer. Does the defendant wish to respond?" Carol looked up. Her eyes met Rowe's for the first time since he'd taken the stand. She saw it there, the absolute certainty that he'd won, that the system would believe him over her, that he was untouchable. She smiled, small, cold, patient. "Yes, Your Honor," Carol said quietly. "I have several questions for Officer Rowe." Prosecutor Michael Hammond stood, adjusting his tie. He was young, maybe 3 years out of law school, still carrying the eager efficiency of someone who believed in the system. He glanced at his file, then at Rowe, then back to Judge Bennett. "Your Honor, the people request a brief continuance to gather additional evidence and witness statements regarding the incident." Standard procedure. Give them time to build a stronger case, to line up more officers who'd swear they saw what Rowe saw, to turn a simple disorderly conduct charge into something that would stick. Judge Bennett reached for his gavel. "The court will reconvene." "Your Honor." Carol's voice cut through the room like a scalpel. Calm, professional, each syllable precisely placed. Every head turned. She stood slowly, her handbag still in one hand, her gold pen in the other. "Before you rule, I'd like to address several factual inaccuracies in Officer Rowe's testimony." Bennett frowned. "Ms." He glanced at his paperwork, searching for a name that wasn't there. "I'll address the court properly in a moment," Carol said. "But first, the record needs correction." She turned slightly, her eyes finding Rowe's. "Officer Rowe testified that I refused to provide identification when asked. However, Federal Courthouse Security Protocol 16C, subsection 3, specifically states that judicial officers are not required to present credentials when entering through designated judicial entrances. Hammond's pen stopped moving across his legal pad. Furthermore, Carol continued, her voice never rising, never wavering, the officer stated I was non-compliant with lawful orders. Under Terry v. Ohio, 392 U.S. 1, an officer must have reasonable suspicion of criminal activity to detain an individual. Attempting to enter a public building through an unlocked entrance does not constitute reasonable suspicion. Bennett leaned forward, his boredom evaporating. Officer Rowe also claimed I created a disturbance visible to courthouse staff. Carol's pen tapped once against her notebook. I'd like to request that all security footage from a main entrance, timestamped between 8:43 and 8:47 a.m. this morning, be preserved as evidence. Additionally, any body camera footage from both Officer Rowe and Officer Dolan should be secured immediately to prevent tampering or deletion. Hammond's face had gone pale. His eyes darted to Rowe, then to Carol, then back to his notes, as if they might suddenly contain an explanation for what was happening. Carol wasn't finished. Your Honor, I'd also like to note that under the Federal Rules of Evidence, Rule 608, a witness's character for truthfulness may be attacked by evidence of prior conduct. I believe Officer Rowe's personnel file contains relevant information regarding his credibility. The courtroom had gone absolutely silent. Even the court reporter had stopped typing, her fingers frozen above the keys. Judge Bennett set down his gavel very carefully. Counselor, he stopped. Who exactly are you? Carol reached into her handbag. Her fingers closed around the leather wallet that held her credentials. That, she said, is an excellent question. Carol didn't pull out her credentials. Not yet. Instead, she turned to Judge Bennett with the practiced deference of someone who'd stood in courtrooms her entire professional life. Your Honor, before I identify myself, I'd like to exercise my right to question Officer Rowe regarding the material inconsistencies in his testimony. Bennett looked at Hammond. Hammond looked like a man watching a car accident in slow motion, unable to stop it, unable to look away. This is highly irregular, Bennett said slowly. But curiosity flickered in his eyes. Whoever this woman was, she knew her way around a courtroom. But I'll allow it. Officer Rowe, you're still under oath. Rowe shifted in his seat. The confidence from 5 minutes ago had developed hairline cracks. Carol set her handbag down and approached the witness stand, her notebook open. Officer Rowe, you testified under oath that I refused to provide identification when requested. Is that correct? Yes, that's correct. Did you at any point actually ask to see my courthouse credentials? Rowe's jaw tightened. You were attempting to enter through an unauthorized. That's not what I asked. Carol's voice remained perfectly level. Did you request to see my credentials? Yes or no? A pause. Too long. You didn't appear to have any. Officer Rowe, please answer the question. Did you ask? No. Carol made a note. So you testified that I refused to provide something you never requested. Is that accurate? Hammond started to stand, thought better of it, and sank back down. You also stated under oath that I became aggressive. Carol flipped a page. Can you describe for the court the specific threatening actions I took? Did I raise my fists? Did I advance toward you? Did I make verbal threats? Rowe's collar seemed tighter suddenly. You raise your voice. I raised my voice. What did I say when I raised my voice? You claim to be a judge, and claiming to be a judge constitutes aggressive behavior in your professional opinion. When someone's lying to avoid. Did I make any threatening movements, Officer Rowe? Any at all? Sweat beaded at Rowe's hairline. No, but your tone. My tone. Carol, let the words hang in the air. Let me ask you something else. You mentioned in your testimony that security footage captured my disruptive behavior. That footage exists, correct? There are cameras at every entrance. Then you won't object to that footage being preserved and submitted as evidence. Rowe's eyes darted to Dolan, still sitting in the back of the courtroom. The footage should show. A simple yes or no, officer. Do you consent to the court reviewing the security footage from this morning's incident? The silence stretched like taffy. Rowe opened his mouth, closed it. His hands gripped the arms of the witness chair. I have no objection, he finally said, but his voice had lost its certainty. Carol closed her notebook. Your Honor, I'd like to formally request that all video evidence be preserved immediately. She paused. And now, I'm prepared to identify myself. She reached for her handbag. Judge Bennett leaned forward. Rowe's face had gone gray. Carol's fingers closed around the leather credential wallet. She drew it out slowly, deliberately, letting the gold federal seal catch the fluorescent light. She flipped it open and held it up for Judge Bennett to see. For the record, she said, her voice carrying to every corner of the small courtroom. I am the Honorable Carol Noyes, presiding judge of the Federal District Court, Northern Division. The courtroom exploded. Judge Bennett's face drained to color, so fast he looked like he might pass out. His hand shot out, gripping the edge of the bench for support. Oh my God! The bailiff, Marcus Henderson, had been standing near the door. He took 2 steps forward, his eyes locked on Carol's credentials, then on her face. Recognition hit him like a freight train. Judge Noyes. His voice cracked. Oh, Jesus. Oh, no. Hammond was already on his feet, papers scattering as he grabbed for his briefcase. His hand shook so badly he dropped it twice. He knew what this meant. His career had just taken a nosedive, and there was nothing he could do to stop the fall. The case hadn't just evaporated. It had turned into a nuclear bomb. Your Honor, Judge Noyes, I had no idea. Hammond's words tumbled over each other. I was assigned this case 20 minutes ago. I never. Carol held up one hand. Hammond fell silent. In the back of the courtroom, Dolan leaned over to Rowe. What does this mean? Rowe stared at Carol's credentials like they were written in a foreign language. His mouth opened and closed. The swagger had completely vanished, replaced by something that looked almost like confusion. He still didn't understand. After everything, he genuinely didn't grasp the magnitude of what he'd done. You're a judge, Rowe said slowly, as if testing the words. I told you that, Carol replied, her voice ice-cold, on the courthouse steps. You laughed in my face. Bennett found his voice, though it came out strangled. Judge Noyes, he looked at Rowe, then at Hammond, then back to Carol. I need to call a recess. Immediately. This entire proceeding. No. Carol's single word cut through the chaos. No recess. Not yet. She turned to face Rowe fully, still standing in the witness box, still under oath. Officer Rowe, do you understand what you've done? You didn't just detain a random citizen. You arrested a sitting federal judge. You committed perjury in a federal courtroom while testifying about that arrest. She paused. And you did it all on camera. The color that had drained from Rowe's face didn't return. Understanding was finally starting to dawn. Bailiff Henderson, Carol said quietly, please retrieve my robes from my chambers. We're going to finish this properly. Emergency recess. Council chambers. Now. Judge Bennett's voice cut through the courtroom's stunned silence. Carol stood motionless as the courtroom emptied. Her wrist still bearing the ghost pressure of handcuffs, removed only minutes before. Henderson touched her elbow gently. Come on, he murmured. Let's get you sorted. In chambers, Bennett paced like a caged animal. This is a catastrophe. An unmitigated disaster. He stopped, facing Carol. Judge Noyes, I am profoundly. Save it. Carol's voice was flat. She turned to Henderson. My chambers. 3rd floor. They walked through corridors that had been her domain for 15 years. Past the security desk, where Frank should have recognized her immediately, should have escorted her upstairs with profuse apologies about the confusion. Past the clerk's office, where Margaret had watched her being led away in handcuffs. past the courtroom where she'd presided over hundreds of cases. Her nameplate gleamed on the door, Honorable Carol Noyes. Inside, everything was exactly as she'd left it. Her robes hung behind the door. Her gavel rested on the desk. Photographs lined the credenza, her swearing-in ceremony, law school graduation, her mother's proud smile. Henderson stood by the window, giving her space. Carol lifted her robes from the hook, the fabric heavy and familiar in her hands. She thought of every case she'd heard, every decision she'd made, every defendant who'd stood before her. Had any of them felt this stripped of dignity, this invisible? She slipped the robes over her shoulders, fastening them with practiced movements. The weight settled across her back like armor, like memory, like duty. In the mirror, she studied her reflection. Same face, same robes. But something fundamental had shifted. She'd stood on both sides now, the elevated bench and the defendant's box. She'd been seen and utterly unseen, recognized and completely erased. "Ready?" Henderson asked. Carol adjusted her collar, straightened her spine. She thought of the courtroom waiting below, of Bennett and the prosecutors, and her own humiliation still hanging in the air like smoke. "Not as a defendant," she said quietly, meeting her own eyes in the mirror. "Never as a defendant." She turned toward the door, robes billowing. "Let's finish this. All rise for the Honorable Judge Carol Noyes." The bailiff's voice rang through the courtroom with ceremonial precision. Every head turned toward the doors. Carol entered. Her robes swept behind her, black and immaculate. Her gavel rested in her right hand, not gripped tightly, but held with the casual authority of 15 years on the bench. Her footsteps echoed in the absolute silence. At the defense table, Rowe shifted in his seat. Dolan's smirk had vanished entirely. Judge Bennett stood at the bench, relief evident in his posture. "Judge Noyes, the bench is yours." "Thank you, Your Honor." Carol ascended the steps with measured grace, each movement deliberate. She arranged her robes, set her gavel down precisely, and settled into the high-back chair. From this vantage point, the courtroom looked different. Smaller, somehow. More manageable. She let the silence stretch, studying the two officers below. Rose stared at the table. Dolan's jaw worked soundlessly, his earlier confidence replaced by something that looked remarkably like fear. "Officer Rowe." "Officer Dolan." Carol's voice carried effortlessly through the space, not loud, but impossibly clear. "Please stand." They rose awkwardly, chair scraping. "An hour ago," Carol continued, "you entered this courthouse. You arrested a sitting federal judge without cause, without verification, without the most basic professional diligence. You handcuffed her. You paraded her through these halls. You laughed." Rowe's face had gone pale. Dolan swallowed visibly. "Officer Rowe, do you know what the penalty is for violating a citizen's civil rights under color of law?" We didn't," Rowe stammered. "Officer Dolan, do you understand that false arrest is both a criminal and civil offense?" Dolan's mouth opened. Nothing emerged. Carol leaned forward slightly, hands folded before her. "You are now defendants in a federal civil rights violation case. Charges include false arrest, unlawful detention, and deprivation of rights under the 4th and 14th Amendments. The Department of Justice has been notified. The FBI will be investigating." She paused, letting each word sink in. "How do you plead?" The question hung in the air like a sword. Rowe's voice cracked. Not guilty, Your Honor." "Not guilty," Dolan whispered. Carol picked up her gavel, its weight familiar and right. "We'll see about that." Bailiff, cue the security footage. Main monitors. The courtroom lights dimmed slightly as 3 large screens flickered to life. Carol kept her expression neutral, though her pulse quickened. She hadn't seen this yet. Hadn't wanted to. The timestamp read 8:47 a.m. The courthouse steps appeared in grainy color, concrete morning sun, people moving purposefully toward the entrance. Then Carol appeared on screen, climbing the steps in her tan blazer, handbag over one shoulder. Rowe and Dolan intercepted her at the landing. The courtroom watched in absolute silence as on-screen Carol stopped, clearly surprised. Her mouth moved, words lost without audio. She reached into her handbag, extracted something. Her judicial credentials, Carol knew. The leather case she'd carried for 15 years. Rowe barely glanced at it, waved it away. Carol's face on the monitor showed confusion, then concern. She pointed toward the main entrance. Rowe shook his head, his hand moving to her elbow. Audio, Carol said quietly. The bailiff adjusted controls. Sound crackled through the speakers. Federal judge, and I need to. On screen, Carol's voice, calm but firm. Yeah, sure you are. Rowe's voice, dripping condescension. Ma'am, you need to come with us. I'm showing you my credentials. My identification is... Listen, lady. Dolan moved closer, blocking her path to the main entrance. You can explain it all inside. Let's go. Rowe's grip tightened on her elbow, clearly visible on camera. He steered her toward the side entrance, the one defendants used. Carol's body language shifted from confused to resistant, but Rowe's hand remained locked on her arm. As they moved off camera, the audio continued. Rowe's voice casual and amused. Just another defendant trying to skip the line. They think rules don't apply to them. Dolan laughed. Probably got a warrant. They usually do. The camera angle switched. Interior hallway. Rowe and Dolan propelling Carol forward. Past Margaret from the clerk's office. Past Frank from security, who turned to stare. Past 3 attorneys who pressed themselves against the wall. Rowe was still talking, his voice carrying, federal judge. That's a new one. Last week someone claimed to be the governor's cousin. Dolan's laugh echoed off the marble walls. On screen, Carol's face was composed, but her jaw was tight. Her hands had begun to shake. Stop there, Carol said. The footage froze, Carol mid-step. Rowe's hand still gripping her elbow, Dolan grinning beside them. Carol let the silence breathe. Play it again. Carol opened the manila folder before her, its thickness telling its own story. The courtroom remained silent, all eyes fixed on the bench. Officer Rowe's personnel file, she said, her voice carrying clearly. Obtained during recess pursuant to federal subpoena. She adjusted her reading glasses, though she'd already memorized every damning detail. 23 formal complaints filed against Officer Anthony Rowe in 5 years of service. She paused, let that number settle. 19 of those complaints involve people of color. Rowe's attorney half rose. Your Honor, I must object. Sit down, counselor. These are public records. Carol's gaze didn't leave the file. 4 allegations of excessive force. 2 resulted in settlements paid by the city. Total cost to taxpayers, $307,000. She turned a page, the sound crisp in the silence. Officer Rowe has attended 3 mandatory diversity training sessions. October 2019, March 2021, August 2023. Carol looked up. Apparently ineffective, given that we're here today. Rowe stared at the table, his face mottled red. There's more. 12 complaints specifically mention Officer Rowe's dismissive attitude toward citizens attempting to show identification or explain their presence. 5 complaints describe him using phrases like "sure you are" or "tell it to the judge" when citizens identified themselves as professionals, doctors, attorneys, business owners. Carol set down Rowe's file, picked up a thinner one. Officer Dolan, 15 formal complaints in 3 years. All 15 involve minority citizens. She flipped through pages. What's particularly interesting about Officer Dolan's record is the pattern. In 12 of these 15 complaints, Officer Rowe was also present. Officer Dolan appears to function primarily as Officer Rowe's backup in questionable stops. She read from a specific complaint. Officer Dolan stood by while Officer Rowe detained my son for 20 minutes because he didn't believe a black teenager could own the bicycle he was riding. The bicycle my son had received for his birthday, with the receipt still in his backpack. Carol closed the folder. This isn't about a single mistake. This is about a pattern of behavior, a systematic failure to see certain citizens as deserving of basic dignity, basic belief, basic respect. She leaned forward. A pattern that has cost this city hundreds of thousands of dollars, that has damaged countless lives, that brought it inevitably to my courthouse steps. The words hung in the air like an indictment. And now, gentlemen, it's cost you something too. Show more. 4:49 p.m. Carol straightened in her chair, both hands flat on the bench before her. The courtroom held its collective breath. I have reviewed all evidence presented today. The security footage, the personnel records, the testimony. Her voice was measured, deliberate. I find both defendants guilty. Rowe's head snapped up. Dolan made a strangled sound. Officer Anthony Rowe, you are guilty of violating civil rights under color of law, in violation of Title 18, United States Code, Section 242. You are guilty of false arrest. You are guilty of perjury before this court. Carol's gaze was steady, unflinching. Officer James Dolan, the same. She picked up her gavel, but didn't strike it yet. Officer Rowe, your pattern of abuse spans 5 years. 23 complaints. Hundreds of thousands in settlements. Countless lives disrupted, damaged, diminished by your actions. You were given training. You were given chances. You responded by laughing while you violated the constitutional rights of a federal judge. Carol's voice hardened. 8 years in federal prison. No parole. Rowe's face went chalk white. Officer Dolan, you enabled this pattern. You stood by. You laughed along. You made yourself complicit in every violation, every humiliation, every injustice. She paused. 5 years in federal prison. No parole. Dolan slumped in his chair. Furthermore, both of you are hereby stripped of your law enforcement certifications, permanently. You will never again carry a badge or wield the authority you so grievously abused. The gavel struck once, sharp and final. But Carol wasn't finished. There's one more matter. She looked past the defendants to the gallery, where department brass sat in uncomfortable silence. I am ordering a comprehensive federal investigation into this police department's hiring, training, and disciplinary practices. The Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice will conduct a full pattern and practice investigation. Chief Morrison started to rise. Carol's raised hand stopped him. You've had 23 complaints against one officer, 15 against another, multiple settlements, mandatory trainings that accomplished nothing. The time for internal review has passed. She nodded to the bailiffs. Remove the defendants. Rowe and Dolan were lifted from their chairs, hands cuffed behind their backs, the same cuffs they'd used on Carol hours before. Rowe's eyes met hers briefly, filled with something that might have been comprehension, might have been rage. Carol remained on the bench as they were led away, her robes draped around her like armor, her gavel resting beneath her hand. Through the tall windows, late afternoon sun slanted across the courtroom, illuminating the seal behind her, a reminder of the justice she'd sworn to uphold. She had been stripped of dignity this morning. She had reclaimed it, not just for herself, but for every person those officers had dismissed, ignored, violated. Justice finally served.